So yesterday, a whole lot of discussion, obviously, about C.J. Stroud not throwing and everything. Some people are worried about it. Some people think it's no big deal, and everywhere in between. Likely, percentage-wise, the chances are that it's probably not going to be a big deal. It'd be nice to know exactly what the situation is, but we know we're not going to get that. So the positive things from yesterday, one of which it didn't really register with me until Sean Pendergast brought it up this morning, was one of the answers. Two things. I want to talk about the offensive line and some of the positive signs, and secondly, just the young wide receivers and some of the positive things other than just the good clips we've seen or some of the good play we've seen out there. We haven't been able to watch these receivers catch passes from C.J. Stroud yet, but DeMeco said a couple things yesterday that I actually got pretty excited about. First, when asked about the mentality of the offensive line, it was DeMeco's use of the word drastic or drastically early in this sound clip that I think means something and should be a positive sign. Asked about the offensive line mentality. Here is DeMeco yesterday.
It's a great question. Our offensive line, the mindset, I see it drastically changing. I see Coach Cole Popovich, his instant impact on those guys. You can see it from the way they work in their individual drills, the way they come off the line with low pass. It's just the small technique things that you see, how they're dialed in on their hand placement, just speaking the same language. One of the coolest things I've seen when we were working out in phase 2, we work out, we activate our guys here in the bubble, and we all travel outside to do our different drills. And to see the O-line come out, and whoever was out first, they waited on the other guys. And they joined together as a group, and then they traveled down to the opposite end of the field to do their position work. So that just shows me that togetherness, that connection that I truly believe in. You want to be a great unit, you have to be connected. So Cole has kind of spurred that connection, that intensity, the mentality that I'm looking for. And we have that. We have the intangibles of what it takes. Now we just got to go out and get it done when we put pads on.
So when it comes to intangibles, obviously it could mean a million different things. With the offensive line, the good offensive lines, they're good dudes usually. They're usually really good dudes. It's good to have one just genuine a-hole in there as well. I don't know who the a-hole is yet on this offensive line. It's not an essential, but it can help at times. Just a psychotic nut job. But they lacked cohesion for the last several years now on the offensive line. And obviously the concern with the Texans this year on their offensive line is the interior offensive line and perhaps at right tackle, depending on where Titus Howard plays. A lot of inexperience out there, or guys who haven't been all that impressive in their career, but are passable offensive linemen. Cam Robinson has been a passable, just about average offensive lineman in his career. And I'm not panicking about him potentially starting at left tackle if Ariante Ursary isn't. But it's always the sum total of the offensive line. And the only way you get the absolute most out of guys, whether it's a bunch of first-round picks or a bunch of just journeymen, it's just to have extreme cohesion and a mindset that, it's us against, we're gonna handle everything in-house. We're gonna police each other. I never felt like we had that. I don't think Laramie Tonsel was the right veteran to create that mindset. And as many of you have pointed out before, but just by way of illustration, one of the better Texans offensive lines in the franchise's history was 2011, 2012. You had Dwayne Brown, first rounder. Wade Smith was a third-round pick who had spent a couple of years at 3 different teams before he got to the Texans, ends up going to the Pro Bowl in 2012. Chris Myers, 6th-round pick, came from Denver. Mike Brizell, undrafted rookie free agent who was a rookie when I was in my last year or two in the league, and honestly, I was shocked by what Mike Brizell became as part of one of this. In 2011, these guys were 2nd in the league in rushing. And then Eric Winston, 3rd rounder. The draft, as we know, the physical traits, the draft status, all of that doesn't ultimately end up mattering. But people start getting a little nervous when you don't have at least a couple of first rounders here or there. The Texans have plenty of the physical talent. It's about, look, that was a very well-coached offense with a good offensive coordinator and a really good offensive line coach. So Cole Popovich, who was mentioned a couple of times in there, obviously going to be a big factor. If we go more recently, you go to the Bucs, And Tristan Wirfs, awesome first rounder, right? But Ben Bredesen last year, this is one of the better offensive lines in the league last year. And Baker Mayfield was pressured very, very little relative to a lot of most other quarterbacks. Ben Bredesen had only had 1 year as a full-time starter in New York. Graham Barton was the first-round pick last year, so you're playing a rookie there. Cody Mock and Luke Goedeke, obviously a couple second-rounder. That's not an all-star lineup of studs across the board, because we've seen the other side of it, which is the Texans at various times, it's been one of the more frustrating things since I've been in sports radio, is people will say, how come the Texans don't spend on their offensive line? They've just been bad at it. They've spent by way of draft capital. Last year, they were one of the top 5 paid offensive lines in all of football, and they just weren't getting a whole lot out of it. So Caley and Papovich are a huge, huge factor, obviously, in how much you get out of those guys and which guys emerge and hopefully overperform compared to their draft status or whatever else it might be. The other one that honestly didn't really sink in until today, and again, I'll credit Sean Pendergast, fresh off vacation, for pointing it out, but was when DeMeco was asked a question about how is minicamp going to be different from OTAs or whatever it might be. But DeMeco kind of moved it into a discussion about last year's rookies and then this year's rookies. And when it comes to things that I'm really starting to trust DeMeco on, it's the guys that he speaks positively about early in the process, the rookies that he speaks positively about early in the process. He's not just saying it to be nice. And like last year, it was Kamari Lassiter. They were very, very positive on him early in the process. So here's DeMeco with that answer.
For our entire process throughout the OTAs, for me, the mini camp doesn't change anything. Like, it's still the same process. Can you see continued growth from the guys? And it just reminds me of last year, like some rookies like Kamari and Kalen, watching them last year in these settings, watching how they competed, watching how their impact showed instantly. They showed up, they were making plays, and you see how those guys perform throughout the season. So I think we have a similar situation this year with some of the rookie wide receivers and Noel and Higgins, just seeing their immediate impact on our offense, the plays that they're making, like seeing the way they work, the way they compete. I'm hoping that translates to the season as well. Similar to Kamari and Kalen, I think Jalen and Jaden are 2 guys who can really help us out this year.
So last year, I was a little bit nervous when they were putting as much faith as they did in Kamari Lassiter, and I was stupid to be nervous about it. Obviously, I was wrong on that. Although there's that grumpy old man in me that's always going to just bristle against, like, well, he's a rookie, he hasn't done anything yet. And it's important to point out, DeMeco doesn't just say this about all rookies. The fact that he's so much different than Bill O'Brien, who famously insisted that rookies don't know anything and just was reluctant to start them in week 1, but didn't start Deshaun Watson until midway. We went through an entire training camp of Bill O'Brien convincing us that Deshaun just isn't ready yet. And, so Deshaun's not getting those reps as a starter. And then lo and behold, that lasted all of 1/2 of a game before you realize, oh crap, we better play the rookie. Like, we're not going to be burdened by that old school mentality. And part of that philosophy, like, football is the slowest to change with the times, the NFL specifically. High school football, they change like crazy. It's awesome. College, likewise, to a lesser degree, but still way faster than the NFL. And really, that some of that mentality of not like wanting to play rookies early, that comes from pre-free agency back in the 80s and before that, where when you drafted a rookie, if he was gonna be good, you were gonna have 15 years with that dude, and you could take your time with him. And likewise, you had veterans on the team who had been there for 15 years, and you could do it. Now, the most valuable, if you have a good player, the absolute most bang for the buck you're ever going to get is in that first rookie contract. So it's stupid to not play them right away. So the fact that he brought up both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel there, I'm kind of excited about that, because we've seen good things from them in OTAs. There's a natural like a hesitancy to, or at least for me, I get really nervous about slot receivers. And getting excited about them in OTAs or training camp, go to Braxton Miller or anybody else before that, because those slot receivers, when they're rookies, they're going against really vanilla looks. People aren't game planning for them. And when you get into the regular season, slot receiver is a position almost like quarterback, where you just got to be able to read coverages, understand leverage, and all these things. So it can take a little while longer to come along. But it's also hard to ignore how fast Jalen Noel is. I mean, that's another philosophy that I think DeMeco probably believes is, man, when you've got speed and you can trust the guy, get him out on the field, because speed puts stress on a defense. So those two things right there, the offensive line and the rookie wide receivers. Offensive line, there's so much question marks abound with the offensive line. The receivers, I'm genuinely excited about both those guys, but they are still rookies. But it's nice to hear that at the very least, there's a focus on the mentality of the offensive line and the mindset, because for as many coaches that talk about culture and the intangibles, DeMeco has 100% demonstrated that he can foster that on the defensive side of the ball. On the offensive side of the ball, I think some of the issues with it were things that he inherited. I think Laramie Tonsel or other veterans and their influence on the younger guys isn't the same as the influence of some of those veteran guys on defense, or it wasn't the same as the influence of some of those veteran guys on defense. So for DeMeco, we talk about whether DeMeco, as a defensive coach, how much time can he spend with the offense, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of DeMeco's skills as a coach that's really hard to define and pin down isn't any of the technical stuff that he is really good at. It's his ability to identify football character, his identity to identify guys who really, really care about it and guys who are going to work. And that's hard to do. A lot of people think they can and they can't. I think DeMeco has a knack for it. And if he just focuses his attention on that side of the ball, I'm excited about that part of it. I really like that rookies are getting early opportunities in Houston. People are coming more and more polished out of college. Yeah, it's true too. I think, in some ways they are, in some ways they aren't. The quarterback position is a whole nother scenario, but CJ was a lot more polished than a lot of young quarterbacks these days, because they asked him to do a lot of things in Ohio State that a lot of colleges don't. They had option routes. Which, by the way, option routes. So for those who don't know option routes, when the receiver changes his routes based on what coverage he's seeing. They do that at Ohio State. A lot of colleges don't. They're just running their preordained routes, and that's it. That's something that was huge for Tom Brady, and they're very good at it. And Kaylee obviously had experience watching Tom Brady do that, and CJ has experience with it. So the more little wrinkles they can add like that, I think CJ's ready for it. Too worried about himself, and I'm guessing you're asking about Tonsel, or talking about Tonsel, how good he looks. He's a great player, but he doesn't elevate the play around him. Yeah, and I'm not here to just pile on. Not here to pile on Tonsel necessarily. He is what he is. He's a finesse offensive tackle, and when it comes to the way the defense plays, or a team that might have a punishing run game, Tunsel's not going to be that guy that's leading the charge on having a punishing run game. And when it comes to all the leadership stuff and everything else like that, I don't think I've ever heard anybody really point to him. I mean, even when people were defending Tonsel last year, they were saying, no, the offensive line room was fine. Everybody really liked Tonsel. I'm like, yeah, that's a problem. They voted him captain. Right. Those guys don't know how to play good offensive football in the NFL. I don't care if a lagging offense identifies various guys as like, oh, no, he's a leader. Yeah, I know. Sorry, I've been watching Fargo. Speaking like a Minnesotan all over the place. Let's see. What's Scott say? Kasia. I really hope our O-line will work as one unit. Yeah, the disconnect was one of the biggest problems last year. And just some of the just actual nuts and bolts of the communication, that comes down to the coaching as well. Can you get the communication pre-snap better? Yep, competent and consistent play from the offensive line. Strausser versus Gibbs. Yeah, Alex Gibbs versus Chris Strausser. Alex Gibbs Sr. versus Chris Strausser. For those of you who just joined us, we were talking about the 2011 Texans. Tonsel was a Gucci Man guy. I can't judge any of the younger generation's fashion choices unless they just flat out care about fashion too much. I really don't like it. I'm not super cool with offensive linemen in general being into fashion. You'd much rather have a guy that wears just wears grungy flip-flops, and or if they're from the country and they wear and camo is a big part of their ensemble, I like that. If they're from the city, I want to see them in a lot of white t-shirts, not even like not nice Gucci t-shirts, just a lot of this was a t-shirt I wore yesterday and I'm going to wear it again today. None of that. Oh yeah, Scott, I'm not saying you're piling on. Yeah, you and I are in agreement. You're in agreement. Put him in the wood chipper. I'm watching the TV show and it's like a different, so far at least, I'm through season 2, and it's a completely different cast and characters are mostly in each season so far, and I really like it. I've enjoyed it a lot. I have high expectations. We have a Super Bowl caliber defense, and in my opinion, a top 5 quarterback and a top 5 receiver average play from the O-line makes us real contenders. The other part, if I'm going to bring up offensive linemen or offensive lines who overperformed, it would look differently this year, but the rest of the offense picking up the offensive line would be like in Baltimore last year. That Baltimore offensive line did not look good on paper or by previous playing experience, but I think they're A, well coached, and B, they had Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the backfield. And man, that puts a bind on a front seven. And it's, as we know, hard to blitz, hard to read, all those things. With the Texans, it wouldn't be quite that. CJ's not quite the runner Lamar Jackson is, but if you just balance everything out with the weaponry, the pass catching ability of Woody Marks, if he can come along, yeah, you can do things to make things easier for the offensive line. And that was a big part of, that offensive line from the Texans that I had pulled up. And like all those guys played really well together as a group, but part of it too was also they wouldn't have looked as good without Arian Foster and without Andre Johnson. Like obviously those guys wouldn't take offense with that. I've had conversations with Wade Smith about that. It's a team. It's, to quote Bill O'Brien, it's the team, it's the team, it's the team. Capital T, capital E, capital A, capital M. Thank you for that, Bill. Please like, subscribe, etc.